The 2018 Ontario election has been unprecedented in so many ways, and it became even more so this past weekend when the Premier of Ontario publicly acknowledged with 5 days to go that she knew this election was not winnable for the Liberals. Kathleen Wynne then offered some advice to Ontarians on how to mark their ballots on Election Day, June 7th, and that's where we'll start our conversation tonight. Here's Kathleen Wynne, the 25th Premier of Ontario, seeking personal re-election in the Toronto riding of Don Valley West, and we welcome you back to our studio.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks very much.
I do this with all the leaders, so I'm going to say just off the top, for those viewers who think my job over the next 24 minutes is to attack you, I'm going to disappoint them. My job, as I see it, is to sort of try to understand better why you've made the decisions that you've made, so that's where we will start. Why did you concede defeat with 5 days still to go?
Well, Steve, as you know, I mean, you've known me for a long time. You know I work really hard, and you know that I'm very competitive. And so the first 3 weeks of this election, which we knew was going to be tough for us. I mean, we went into it with our eyes wide open. We knew it was going to be a very tough election. We knew that there was a real appetite for change. But I firmly believed that with the plan that we had brought forward, and a plan that built on the work that we'd already done, with an economy that was thriving, with unemployment at a low for 20 years, that we had a plan that the people in the province would see, and we had a chance to be re-elected. After 3 weeks, and I'd worked hard to get ready for the debate, I went into the debate. I felt that I did very well. I'm not asking you to comment on that.
No, I would just say, empirically speaking, the polls suggested you won the debate.
So I felt that I did well. And we waited, you know, a day or so, a couple of days after that, but nothing changed. And we had thought maybe the numbers would move, whether it was the external pollsters or our internal numbers, and that didn't happen. And so I said to my team, you know, we've got to figure out if there's something that we can do to get me out of the way. Because here's what I was hearing. I was hearing from candidates and from people in the province, because I've been all over the province, as you know, that they wanted change, they didn't want a Liberal government, and they didn't want me to be Premier. And so if my getting out of the way and saying, look, you're going to get change, because it's not going to be a Liberal government, and therefore I will not be the Premier, and if that helps my candidates to talk to voters and say, you can vote for me because you know locally I will be your best voice at Queen's Park, then that's what I needed to do. And so that's why I did what I did on the weekend.
I'll pick up on one word in that answer, which is competitive. You are a fiercely competitive person, whether you're running a race, whether you're whatever it is that you're doing. We know that you are. How did you get your head into a position to concede something with 5 days to go?
Because I am equal parts competitive and practical. And what is really important, and as what I said on Saturday, this is not about me. So yes, I'm competitive, and I have that gene, whatever that is. But I am in politics to do the very best that I can for the people of this province. I always have been. And so it's not about my political career or my feelings or my reputation. It's about what is in the best interest of the people of the province. And I believe firmly, Steve, that either a majority Doug Ford government or a majority NDP government is not what the province needs right now. We have an economy that's thriving, as I just said. We've got momentum, and we don't need cutting and slashing of education and healthcare, which is what Doug Ford will do. And we don't need a rigid ideology that says that, you know, we are never going to work with the private sector, and we are going to I'm sure we'll talk about this, but we are going to make sure that strikes go on forever, or we throw money into a strike situation to resolve it every single time. In other words, we never have back-to-work legislation, which is what Andrea Horwath has said. Neither of those extremes, I believe, is good for the province right now. So we need not to have a majority on either side of the ledger.
When your candidates go door to door now, though, and when they say, please vote for me, and if the person at the door says, but your leader's already thrown in a towel, so why should I vote for you? What's the response?
The response is she absolutely has not thrown in the towel. She is working hard to make sure that there are as many Liberals as possible elected to Queen's Park so that we won't have a Doug Ford or an NDP majority. That's the campaign that we're in right now.
Some One of the ironic things I found about social media and just, anecdotal conversations after you made your announcement is that many of your opponents actually responded with restraint, whereas many Liberals responded with outrage. And I want to just play one of them here for you. I don't know if you know Mark Keeley, but Mark's been around Liberal politics for 40 years. He's been in 20 elections as a Liberal volunteer. And he sent out a sort of an e-blast to people he knows after you made your announcement. And here's what he wrote. This selfish, feckless, disloyal, and contemptuous Kathleen Wynne has thrown the fortunes of her party down the drain and the aspirations of thousands of campaign workers and loyalists who believed sadly in the Liberal brand. She and all her inner circle, who should and will pay dearly for this in future, ought not only be ashamed of themselves for advising this course of action, but they will go down in history as the stupidest political apparatchiks in Canadian political history. What do you say to Liberals who think this was just the wrong thing to do?
Well, what I will say is that it is the same team that won us a majority in 2014 when all of the pundits were saying we couldn't get reelected. We won a majority. And, Mark Keeley and the people who are saying these things they're not on the day-to-day campaign bus. They're not making the decisions, and they're not in my skin, listening to people, listening to my candidates, listening to what we're hearing at the doors. And so I have made the decision that I've made because I know that my candidates needed to be able to go to the door and say there is going to be change, because that's what people are looking for. And to make the case that voting for a Liberal locally, who they want to be their voice at Queen's Park, is not going to change the reality that there'll be a new government, but could change whether there's a minority or a majority. And so not having a majority Doug Ford or majority NDP is the objective right now. And I'm sorry that somebody like that doesn't understand that, but that is the reality.
Admittedly, it's only been 2 days since you made the announcement, so you might not have numbers on this yet, but have you got overnight polling which suggests the message either is or is not working?
I don't know yet. We'll see. And quite frankly, Steve, I think it's going to be June 7th that we're going to find out.
Can we play this out a little bit? Because I know when I first heard you say this, I thought to myself, here's a scenario I can imagine happening. Those wavering Liberals, or those Liberals who have decided the only way to stop Ford is to vote NDP, if you repatriate those votes and you bring them home and take those votes away from the NDP, doesn't that help Ford win a majority government? Well,
what I'm saying to people who are thinking they may vote Conservative, in Don Valley West, people are thinking about voting Conservative, right, as opposed to Liberal. Mm-hmm. And so what I was saying to them is, I get that you want change, but actually voting for me, having Liberals at Queen's Park, will mean that, there will be change, but there may be change that isn't as extreme as you might want it. Because, Steve, there are so many people who are very worried about either of those scenarios. They're very worried about the instability. They're very worried about what Doug Ford may or may not do, which, to be fair, we don't know everything that Doug Ford, there's no platform. There's no coherent platform that he's put out. And we know that on the NDP side, that there's a lot of ideology that will tie them to decisions that will not be good for the economy.
Let's put it this way. If we do get a hung parliament, which is essentially what you're asking people to do, right? Hold one of them to a minority and give the Liberals the balance of power so they can keep the excesses, as you see them, of the other two parties in check. Let's say you're one of the hardy band of Liberals that comes back, having won your seat in Don Valley West. Which premier can you get along with best?
So I'm not, there are a bunch of scenarios that we could play out here. Yeah, it is. I'm the only leader who has been a leader in a minority parliament. Right? Mm-hmm. So we got a budget passed. I understand the conversations that have to happen. We're going to have to wait until the election is done to see who's there.
But you're more simpatico with Andrew Horwath, right?
One of the things, though, that has happened in this election, I think, is that the NDP have said to people, well, the Liberals are the same as us. And that's not true. Yes, there are some shared values there, but we're not the same party as the NDP. I'm a Liberal because I actually believe in solving problems in a practical way. I actually believe that being tied to an ideology that says, for example, we'll never have back to work legislation makes no sense. And so that's why I'm a Liberal. So we're not the same, and that's an important point here. And you're right. I don't have very much in common with Doug Ford at all. So I don't think that's a secret to anyone. But I do believe that there are lots of differences between us and the NDP that would have to be played out in whatever scenario comes to fruition.
Well, let's pick up on the example you gave. You were the premier who allowed the college strike to go on for a month. And when you make the argument that we're not as ideological as the NDP because at the end of the day, we will bring back to work legislation in to end something that we think is hopeless, there may be a lot of college students and their parents watching this right now saying, well, when that rubber hit the road and you were in the premier's chair to make that decision, you kind of let that one go on a long time.
Well, here's the thing, though. We had to go through the process. And look, the university strike, the York University strike, has been way longer than the college strike. Yep. We tried to get them back before the election started, and Andrea Horwath and the NDP said, no, we're not going to do that. So we have constitutional responsibilities. We have a commitment to the collective bargaining process. But once that has run its course, and once it is impossible to get to a resolution, then I will and have bring in back to work legislation. And I've said in the situation with the college strike, we probably need to look at how do we deem that there has been that a strike has been long enough. There isn't a mechanism right now. We actually, before the election, we were looking at that, and my hope is that there would be some changes to the legislation. But at the end of the day, Steve, we had that tool as a provincial government to act in the public interest, in this case, the interest of students. But we could be talking about a garbage strike here, Right. And if the NDP is saying they will never use back to work legislation, does that mean a garbage strike goes on forever? Or does it mean that there's just money after money thrown at resolution to get a deal? And that's not a healthy situation either.
I asked you this question at your press conference on Saturday morning, and with the advantage of a couple of more days to think about the answer, I wonder if I'm going to get a different answer this time, because I'm going to ask it again. And it's a weird question to ask, but here goes anyway. Do you want to win your seat?
Yes. Yeah, I do. Well, you saw the connection. Well, I don't know. You weren't at the Eid Bazaar. I was in Thorncliffe Park. I was in Leaside. These are people who have supported me, with whom I've worked on so many issues in the riding.
Listen, I saw so many people in the past few days on the hustings say, Kathleen, we love and respect you.
Yeah. So I want to continue to represent them. I want to continue to work for them. There's lots of work that we still have to do.
I'm just trying to get through my head the notion of the Premier of Ontario, with all of what that job entails, coming back after the 7th of June as one of, who knows, but certainly a very small number of Liberal MPPs, and how you possibly would have the appetite for that job.
Well, the reality is that working in a constituency, taking that voice to Queen's Park, is an important job in and of itself. And remember, Steve, I did that job for 3 years as an MPP. I worked really hard in my constituency. I worked on projects that have come to fruition in my constituency, and there's a lot of that work still to be done. People have a real need for a strong constituency MPP, and if we are in a situation where we have no majority NDP government, no majority Doug Ford Conservative government, then our voice is going to be very, very important.
Let me just take you back 27 days and humor me for a second here. How did you enter the campaign in third place? You're in third place right now.
Right.
How did you see it breaking at some point? Because you did say Saturday morning, yes, we thought we could win. How did you see that happening?
Well, I think the campaign that we thought we were going to be running was a campaign between us and the Conservatives. And I think that the stark contrast, I mean, our campaign logo was care over cuts, and I firmly believe that Doug Ford will cut I firmly believe that he, given the opportunity, will do more even than what Mike Harris did, which was why I got into politics in the first place. And so we thought that was the fight that we had on our hands. And I firmly believe that once people saw what Doug Ford was about, that he wasn't a person of substance, that he was going to be sloganeering and putting out bumper stickers as a platform, and that all of it was going to be about cuts and support for the wealthiest in our society.
You thought that might happen.
I thought that would change the equation.
So it never occurred to you during the course of the campaign, as I'm sure it did to Bob Rae in 1995, that this election just under no circumstances is winnable. That never occurred to you?
No, that was not what we went in with at all.
And in hindsight, which admittedly is 2020, would you now conclude that this election under no circumstances was winnable for you and the Liberals?
No, because I think the circumstances could have been very different. I don't know exactly what happened at the beginning of the campaign. I think part of it is that Doug Ford even had less substance than people expected. And I think that many conservatives, because I have talked to many conservatives, just feel that there is no way that they can cast a vote for this man. And so I think many of them are going to stay home. I don't know, but I think that may happen. Or they have parked their vote somewhere else. And so that's kind of the group, that's part of the group that I'm talking to, because someone who's been a conservative and has parked their vote with the NDP because they don't want a Liberal government, they may actually be more comfortable with a minority of one of the governments with a Liberal, practical sort of voice at Queen's Park. So that's actually the message that we're putting out right now.
As long as you're in the advice-giving phase.
Well, you talked about advice at the beginning. I don't feel like it's so much advice as it's information, because you are steeped in this stuff. You spend a lot of time thinking about politics. Not everybody does, sure. Steve. And so for me to make an argument about fending off a majority, that's not something that people think about with their breakfast every morning, But it's something that I just want people to be able to consider. And I'm not telling people how to vote. I'm just saying, this is a consideration for you. And I want you to know that I'm going to be out of the equation, because that's what we know from everything that's happening right now.
This is the craziest election, though, because, again, in following candidates around who are canvassing, I'm finding Tories who don't want to vote for Tories because they don't like Doug Ford. With respect, I'm finding Liberals who don't want to vote Liberal because they don't like you anymore. And I'm finding people who've sort of never voted NDP and are thinking, can I actually cross that bridge this time? Some people are saying, maybe I'll just vote Green because I don't know what else to do.
But you just made my case. You just
well, I'm
made
not
my
trying
case.
to. I'm just trying to say it's
but that's exactly the situation. That's the information that we know is the reality. And so in that scenario, if you want change, you're not comfortable voting for the Conservatives, you're not comfortable really voting for the NDP, but you don't want a Liberal government, then if the best scenario would be to have no majority Doug Ford government, no majority NDP, and have that third voice that is the practical voice that has actually gotten us to where we are in this province. Because the other factor that you didn't touch on is that people are generally happy that the economy's doing well. They're happy that we've created 1 million jobs and that their kids, I can't tell you the number of people who have come up to me and said, it is so helpful that my kids have free prescription medication. My son is able to go to university because he's got his tuition covered. I'm earning $14 an hour because you raised the minimum wage, and that's changed everything for my family. So people like that. I
get that, but I think that's what's got to make this harder for you, because it's not so much, for many people, the agenda, it's you.
I know.
And how did that happen?
I don't know. That is for others to determine, but I know that is a big part of it, which is exactly why, to go back to my first gambit, I needed to get myself out of the way.
Well, I know you saw John Barber's column a couple of weeks ago, but for those who didn't, I will just read a chunk of it here to remind them. Here we go, Sheldon, if you would. I suspect Wynne will emerge in hindsight as the bold leader of the most capable and effective government Ontario has enjoyed since the heyday of the fabled Big Blue Machine. She will be remembered as the best of her generation, representing Ontario at its best. She failed because she was too ambitious. She failed because she never resorted to easy deceptions. She failed because she's a woman and because she's gay. She failed because she's Ontarian, at the mercy of Ontarians, and we're as ugly as anyone. The future will judge, and what it will say is that we didn't deserve her. That's John Barber, who's covered politics in this city for 40 years, writing in the Toronto Star on the 17th of May. I assume you saw that piece.
I did.
What'd you think when you read it?
Well, it's gratifying. I mean, it's not comfortable to read one's obituary.
Is that how you
There
saw
have been
it?
a few obituaries. But, you know, I really believe in what I've done, Steve. I believe in the work that I've done in my political career. And I hope, not that people will think they didn't deserve me, but I hope that what we've done has made enough of a difference in people's lives and in the life of this province that we will continue. You know, the notion that Doug Ford, as the Premier, would stop fighting climate change just makes my blood run cold. It makes my blood run cold. And so I can name you a number of those things that we need to keep fighting for those things. We need to keep fighting climate change. We need to make sure that our education system is the very best that it can be. And we need not to be tied to an ideology of one group or another. And so to have the ability as a Premier to be flexible enough in your thought that you can bring people from labor, from business, from the community, and government to come together and think of what is the best solution here. It may not be the most popular solution, but what can we do that's going to be in the best interest of the people of the province? That is what I hope can continue. And if I've been able to do that a little bit, and John Barber seems to suggest that they have been, then I'm very happy about that. I just don't want that momentum to stop.
I know you don't want to, because there's still 3 days to go. So
yeah.
But it's natural for you at some point to be thinking about, well, you've just actually suggested it in the last answer, your legacy, what your contribution to the province, positive and negative, will be. And, you know, let's state the obvious here. You're the first female Premier ever in Ontario history. You're the first rookie leader in 4 decades to win an election. I don't know if you know this, but at 5 years and 112 days, which is where you are right now, you're the 10th longest serving Premier of Ontario. 10 out of 25, which, you know, is pretty high up the list.
You're the only person who keeps track of that.
You know,
it's a miracle.
It's a genetic defect of mine to be interested in this kind of stuff.
But it's really interesting. Yeah, yeah.
So you're pretty high up the list. How hurtful is it going to be on Friday morning of this week when you realize that this work that you have really put your blood, sweat, toil, and tears into is over?
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to pretend that it's not going to be sad. I'm already sad about that. You know, I'm already sad that we're not going to be able to implement our childcare plan, that we're not going to be able to make sure that we continue to work with business, because we've got great jobs being created. You know, I'm sad that neither party has the funding for the high-speed rail in their platforms. You know, we need that high-speed rail from Toronto, Kitchener-Waterloo, through London to Windsor. We really need that for our economic growth. So I'm going to keep fighting for those things. I don't know where I'll be, but I hope I'll be at Queen's Park with a good number of Liberals fighting for those things that I believe are going to be the economic drivers and the drivers of a strong, compassionate society. That's where I hope I'm going to be.
Premier, as always, I say this to all the leaders, be safe on the campaign trail for what remains of the campaign, and we thank you for finding some time in your schedule for us at TVO tonight.
Thank you very much, Steve.
That's Kathleen Wynne, 25th Premier of the province of Ontario, running for personal re-election in Don Valley West.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.